In the ever-turbulent landscape of the Middle East, geopolitical tensions have once again surged to the forefront, this time with Russia potentially poised to send warplanes to Israel in support of Iran and Gaza. The catalyst for this potential escalation? Iran's audacious declaration of war on Israel, a move that has sent shockwaves throughout the region and beyond. As the situation teeters on the edge of outright conflict, the specter of a broader regional conflagration looms ominously. Understanding the nuances and implications of such a scenario requires a deep dive into the complex web of alliances, interests, and historical animosities that characterize the Middle East. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. At the heart of this escalating crisis is Iran's belligerent rhetoric and actions towards Israel. With tensions simmering for decades between the two regional powers, Iran's declaration of war marks a significant escalation in hostilities. The Iranian leadership's unwavering support for militant groups such as Hamas in Gaza, coupled with its own military buildup and proxy activities in Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, has long been a source of concern for Israeli policymakers. However, the open declaration of war represents a dangerous escalation that threatens to destabilize the entire region. Against this backdrop, Russia's potential intervention adds a new dimension to an already volatile situation. Historically, Russia has maintained close ties with Iran, both politically and militarily. The two countries share strategic interests in countering Western influence in the region and have cooperated extensively in areas such as energy and defense. Russia's support for Iran in the face of Israeli aggression is thus consistent with its broader geopolitical objectives in the Middle East. However, Russia's calculus is not solely motivated by geopolitical considerations. The Kremlin also seeks to assert itself as a major player in the Middle East, rivaling traditional power brokers such as the United States. By aligning itself with Iran and Gaza in the current crisis, Russia aims to demonstrate its willingness to challenge Western hegemony and defend its allies against perceived threats. Moreover, Russia's support for Iran serves to bolster its own influence in the region, potentially opening up new avenues for diplomatic and military cooperation. For Israel, the prospect of Russian warplanes entering the fray represents a daunting challenge. Long accustomed to relying on its close relationship with the United States for security assistance, Israel now finds itself confronted with the possibility of facing off against a major power with its own strategic interests in the region. While Israel possesses a formidable military capability of its own, the prospect of a direct confrontation with Russian forces raises the stakes to unprecedented levels. Complicating matters further is the situation in Gaza, where Hamas continues to launch indiscriminate rocket attacks against Israeli civilian targets. With Iran providing financial and material support to Hamas, the conflict in Gaza has become intertwined with the broader geopolitical rivalry between Iran and Israel. Russia's potential intervention on behalf of Iran and Gaza thus adds another layer of complexity to an already multifaceted conflict, with potentially far-reaching implications for regional stability. At the same time, the involvement of external powers such as Russia raises the specter of a wider regional conflict. Already, the Middle East is beset by numerous ongoing conflicts, from the civil war in Syria to the sectarian strife in Iraq and Yemen. The addition of a direct confrontation between Israel and Iran, with the potential for Russian involvement, threatens to ignite a broader conflagration that could engulf the entire region in chaos. In this context, diplomatic efforts to defuse the crisis are more urgent than ever. The international community, including key players such as the United States, the European Union, and the United Nations, must work tirelessly to prevent the situation from spiraling out of control. Dialogue and negotiation must replace saber-rattling and brinkmanship if there is to be any hope of avoiding a catastrophic conflict. Furthermore, all parties involved must recognize the interconnected nature of the conflicts in the Middle East and the need for a comprehensive region-wide approach to addressing them. Solutions to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the Syrian civil war, and other ongoing crises must be pursued in tandem rather than in isolation, if there is to be any hope of achieving lasting peace and stability in the region. As the world watches with bated breath, the situation in the Middle East remains highly fluid, with the potential for escalation at any moment. Against this backdrop, The role of key regional players such as Saudi Arabia and Turkey cannot be overstated. Both countries have their own interests and agendas in the region, which could either exacerbate or mitigate the current crisis. Saudi Arabia, a longtime rival of Iran, has historically aligned itself closely with Israel, albeit discreetly due to domestic political sensitivities. The kingdom views Iran's growing influence in the region as a direct threat to its own security and has taken steps to counter Tehran's influence, including through support for anti-Iranian proxies in Yemen and elsewhere. In the current crisis, Saudi Arabia may seek to exploit the situation to further isolate Iran and weaken its regional position, potentially exacerbating tensions and increasing the risk of conflict. Similarly, Turkey's role in the crisis is complex and multifaceted. Under President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Turkey has sought to position itself as a leading power in the Muslim world, often adopting an assertive and interventionist foreign policy. Ankara has cultivated close ties with both Iran and Hamas, viewing them as allies in its broader efforts to challenge the status quo in the region. However, Turkey's relations with Israel have been fraught in recent years, particularly following the Israeli government's crackdown on Palestinian protests and Ankara's vocal support for the Palestinian cause. In the current crisis, Turkey may seek to leverage its influence with Iran and Hamas to diffuse tensions and prevent a wider conflict, although its ability to do so remains uncertain given the complexity of the situation. Meanwhile, the United States, as Israel's staunchest ally, holds significant sway over the course of events in the region. The Biden administration has thus far adopted a cautious approach to the crisis, urging all parties to exercise restraint and avoid actions that could escalate tensions further. However, the United States faces competing pressures, both domestically and internationally, as it seeks to balance its support for Israel with its desire to re-engage diplomatically with Iran. The Biden administration has expressed a willingness to revive the Iran nuclear deal, which was abandoned by the Trump administration in 2018, but progress on that front has been slow due to lingering mistrust and disagreement between the two sides. In the midst of these geopolitical maneuvers and diplomatic wrangling, the human cost of the crisis continues to mount. Civilians in Gaza are caught in the crossfire, facing indiscriminate airstrikes and artillery barrages from Israeli forces while enduring a crippling blockade that has devastated the enclave's economy and infrastructure. In Israel, residents live in constant fear of rocket attacks from Hamas and other militant groups, with air raid sirens and bomb shelters a grim reminder of the ever-present threat of violence. Amidst the chaos and uncertainty, voices of reason and moderation are desperately needed. Civil society groups, peace activists, and ordinary citizens on both sides of the conflict have long called for an end to the cycle of violence and a return to dialogue and negotiation as the only viable path to a just and lasting peace. Their voices must be heard and heeded if there is to be any hope of breaking the cycle of violence and achieving a resolution to the conflict that respects the rights and dignity of all parties involved. Ultimately, the crisis sparked by Iran's declaration of war on Israel underscores the fragility of the Middle East and the urgent need for concerted international action to address the root causes of conflict and instability. Russia's potential intervention, while adding a new layer of complexity to an already volatile situation, also presents an opportunity for diplomatic engagement and conflict resolution. However, if left unchecked, the current crisis threatens to unleash a wave of violence and destruction with far-reaching consequences for the entire region and beyond. The time for action is now. The alternative is too grim to contemplate, with the specter of widespread conflict and untold human suffering hanging over the region like a dark cloud. The time for action is now before it is too late. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your expectations for the future of this situation? What do you think will be the consequences for the countries involved? How do you view this move by Russia? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.